Recording is on.
Okay, so yesterday we stopped at I think we wanted to stop. I've done with this series feeling yesterday after the flashy film, after which we were able to excuse me. Yes. And then we use series feeling to fill date column. Then after which we were able to count the dates, and then I think we introduced the text functions as well, concat and the text join, and today function to get the date of today, the weekday to get the number of the week, that's the day number of the day of the week, and then work day to get the working days from a particular start day to a number of to a specified number of days. And then we also looked at workbook protection, which is either you are protecting your file or workbook or worksheet. And so after that, we were able to do a number of exercises, this and that. And then date and more exercise was the last one we did, if I'm not mistaken. So today we'll be looking at using logical function and formulas. Most of your work as a data analyst, you won't escape using the need to use logical functions in your formulas. Now, what is logical function? Logical function in Excel allows you to test condition and return results depending on whether the condition is true or false. So it's more like you using functions like and, or, if, and others to test if a particular condition is true, and if it is true, it's going to return true or false. So that is just what the logical function does. It's more of like logic, as the name implies. So we're looking at the and function, all function, not function, and then if function, and also combining and nesting logical function. You can combine multiple logical functions to achieve a more complex result. And also you can next logical function like having if inside an if function and all that. So first of all, let's look at and function. Now the and function simply takes from multiple conditions and it will return true only if all conditions are true. I believe some of us must have come encounter with truth table for and or X or and so on and so forth. So I want to quickly explain this with truth table. Let me just Google the truth table for and. From there we'll explain it. Let me say and truth table. Now, if you are looking at my screen, you will see some table. Let me work with this one. Now, P and Q here, they are all statements. And then we are considering a situation whereby you are combining the two statements to evaluate whether it is true or false. I think this one is not complete. Let me look for something. Okay, let me look. Let me use this one. Let me use this one. Aha. I think this is better. Now take note in Excel and in programming languages, as in programming, truth can also be represented with one, while false can be represented with zero. So if you see true, true is one, and false is zero. Yes, can't find the image here again. Okay, let's make do with this one. So looking at this now, this is the and truth table. So remember, like I said, here in this case now, A and B, they are all a statement. For instance, when you say 2 is greater than 0, and then you say 3 is less than 5. Now, when you say 2 is greater than 0 and 3 is less than 5, so here in this case now, A is representing the first statement, 2 is greater than 0, while B is representing the second statement, 3 is less than 5. Now, 2 is greater than 0 is truth, is correct. So that is 1. Now, 3 is less than 5 is also true, and that is 1. And that is, and by the time you combine the two statements, 2 is greater than 0 and 3 is less than 5. It will be true provided that the two conditions, the two statements are true. Because 2 is actually greater than 0 and 3 is actually less than 5. It will be evaluated to true. So, but if you say 2 is less than 1 and 3 is greater than and 3 is less than 5, the first statement is false, whereas the second statement is true. So in that case now you're having 0 and 1. So according to the truth table of and, it will evaluate to false. If you also say 2 is less than 3 and 3 is greater than 4. 2 is actually less than 3, but 3 is not greater than 4. So the first statement is true, but the second statement is false. So in and truth table, in this case now you're having 1 and 0. It will evaluate to false. And because 2, the first statement is true, but the second statement is not true. So provided is and, you are not speaking the truth. So in that case, it will evaluate to false. So looking at this truth table you are seeing here for and truth table, 0 here means false, 0 here means false. So when the first statement is false and the second statement is false, then the resultant statement will become false. When the first statement is false and the second one is true, it will still result to false. When the first one, sorry, this Google something is blocking the number. So when the first statement is true and the second one is false, it will evaluate to false. So, but it can only evaluate to true if the first and the second statement is true. So that is when I say 2 is greater than 0 and 3 is less than 5. So two of them they are true, so it will evaluate to true. So that is the truth table for and. So when you are using and to combine two statements, so it can only be true. When you are using and to combine two statements, it can only be true when the two statement is true. If either of them is false or both of them is false, it will all evaluate to false. I don't know if that is clear enough. Please, if you are not talking, Note yourself. Let me close this. Close this as well. So, next, looking at the all truth table. Looking at the all truth table, the all truth table actually is a kind of opposite of the and. So the or, you are having a situation whereby it can only be false if the both of them are false. Now you say, using our previous example, two is greater, two is greater than zero, or two is greater than zero, or five is greater than three. Both of them is actually truth. So it will evaluate to true. Now you say 2 is greater than 0 or 5 is less than 4. So is either 2 is greater than 0 or 5 is less than 4.
Recording is on.
So in this case now, the for the fact that the first statement is true, it will evaluate to true. If you say the other way around, 2 is less than 0 and 5 is greater than 4, the first statement is false and the second one is true. So, provided you're using or, it will still evaluate to true. But if you have a situation where both of them is false, 2 is less than 3, or 5 is greater than 7, both of them are false, so it will evaluate to false. So the all truth table will evaluate to false only when the both statement is false. So here we have A is false and B is false, so it will evaluate to false. In all other conditions, whether one of them is true or both of them is true, it will always evaluate to true. That is the all truth table. Now, the XOR, even though we're not going to use it, let me just explain, which is also known as exclusive OR. That is what XOR means. It's only evaluate to true when either of them is truth. That is, at least one of them, sorry, at most one of them is true. So when both of them is true, it will evaluate to false. When both of them is false, it will evaluate to false. But it can only evaluate to true when either of them is true, but not both of them. That is for X or truth table. Now, not true table is simply like negation. Negation. If whenever you have A is true, I mean false, if you say not A, it will give you true. When A is true, if you say not A, it will give you false. Just like you say not female, it will give you male. If not male, it will give you female. That's what not is all about. Is a kind of negation. Let me close this. Now, I, excuse me, okay. Now, like I said, the purpose is to test multiple conditions, that is for and. To test multiple conditions and return true only if all conditions are true, like I've said before. So if all the condition is not true, it will return false. So if one condition is false, while the rest is true, take note, with and you can test either and or you can test multiple conditions, not just two. The truth table we saw is simply the truth table for two conditions. So you can have more than two conditions. But for and, it can only be true if all of them is true. If you have up to five conditions, all the five of them must be true for it to evaluate to truth. But if one of them is false, automatically all of them become false. But in the case of all, otherwise the case. All of them will always evaluate to true. If one, at least one is true, it will evaluate to true. If you have five statements or five conditions and you're using all, it will always be true except one, except all of them is false. So if one of them is true, it will always evaluate to true, even though the remaining four is not true. But if all of them is false, it will not evaluate to false. That is for all function. So this is how the syntax look like. You say equal to, of course, in all functions and formula, you tell Excel that I want to use function now by putting equal sign. So you say and then indicate the first condition, second condition, and so on and so forth. That is first, second, third, and as many conditions as you have. Like in this case now, we want to flag pairs with total revenue greater than $2,500. So what do you mean now? We want to check in a column whether it is a pair. In this case now, the column is a column. So in a column now, particularly in this case, the cell 2 of the A column. So we want to check whether what is there is pairs. And we want to check also whether in B2, whether it is what is in B2 is greater than 2,500. So if A2 is actually pairs and B2 is greater than 2,500, it will result to true because both conditions match. But if either of them is false, it will result to false. That is and for you. We are still going to practicalize it within a short while. Now, all function will return true, as I've said before, at least one condition, if at least one condition is true. Like I've said, if you have five conditions and one of them is true and the rest of them is false, it will return true. Unlike the and condition that will return false even if one of them is false. So if you have five conditions and then you're using and, if four is true and one is false, it will still return false for you. But for all, if one of them is true, it will return true for you, even though the rest of the four is false. So this is syntax. Syntax is is similar to that of and. Different is just that you replace and with or, and then you state your conditions: condition one, condition two, condition three, and so on and so forth. Example here: we want to identify pairs or revenue greater than 2,500. So here you are checking if what is in A2 is pairs or what is in B2 is greater than 2,500. So if what is in A2 is pairs, it will give you true. If what is in B2 is greater than 205, it will also give you true, even though what is in A2 is not pair. And if it is pair, it will give you true, even though what is in B2 is not greater than 2,500. So once one of them is true, it will evaluate true, irrespective of whether the second condition is true or false. So it will give you true. So if that is not the case, it will not give you false. So it will give you false only when both of them is not true. When it is not pairs and what is in B is not greater than 2,500. So it will evaluate to false. Now, what about the not function? The not function simply reverse the result of a logical test, like I've said, give you the opposite output. So, if for instance you want to flag revenue not revenue less than or equal to 2,500, you can simply first of all get revenue that is greater than 2,500 and then put not. So the not will simply change this one that is greater than 2,500 to what is what less than or equal to 2,500. So the output will be true if revenue is actually less than or equal to 2,500. I want to believe we are together. All right. Now, next is the if function. If function tests whether a condition is true and it will indicate true. It will give you the option to indicate what That is the value that you want to indicate if it is true, and value that you want to indicate if it is false. So the purpose is to test condition and return different results for either true or false. So in the previous one we have been using and, or, and not can only return true or false for you. But if is a kind of improved variety of it. So instead of returning true, you are going to tell it what it should write for you, what it should enter in Excel cell for you if it is true, and what it should enter in Excel cell for you if it is false. So instead of just stating true, false means what? So, but syntax, the if function will give you the ability to say if it is true, okay, enter this value. If it is false, enter this value. So, and that is why we have the syntax as follows: that equal to if you state the condition, is the condition, and then value if true. So if the condition is true, you indicate the value that you want it to be entered if it is true. And then the value if false. So if it is false, you indicate the value that you want to enter if it is false. Apart from if, there are ifs. Ifs is to test for multiple condition, and the same syntax applies. But for now, we are going to limit our study in this topic with if. Subsequently, we'll go into the advanced topic that contain ifs. There is average ifs as well, some ifs and all that. So we'll still look at all of this. Now, this is an example of if condition. We are saying that if what is inside cell A2 is rain, so meaning that it is raining, value if true is what? Take umbrella. So if it is raining, take umbrella. Else, if it is not true, you should do what? No umbrella needed. So that is what the if function does for us. You can combine logical function with if. That is, you have logical function inside an if function. In this case now, we are saying if and A2 equal to cash, comma B2 greater than 200. Then you say cash over 200, otherwise you say others. Let me explain. First of all, you need to understand the AND function. What the AND function here is saying is checking two conditions, and A2 equal to cash. Now, what is inside A2? Is it cash? And also, what is inside B2? Is it greater than 200? Remember, both conditions have to be true for it to evaluate to true. So if these two conditions now evaluate to true, now the if statement is saying if that is true, then you should indicate that cash is over 200. Else, if it is not true, indicate order. Order. I go over it again. The inner, of course, let me say this: Excel usually execute function from the inside, from the inner nest, the nested function itself, then through to the outside function. It's just like the way you have onions. Instead of you cutting the onions from outside, they are cutting it from inside. So Excel begin the execution or begin the interpretation from the inner function through to the outer one. So that's why we begin with this. So what Excel will look at is that it will check this one first, this AND function. What is it checking there? What is inside A2? Is it equal to cash? What is inside B2? And also, what is inside B2? Is it greater than 200? Remember, both of them need to be truth to for it to evaluate to true. So if either of them is not true, then it will evaluate to false. So if both of them evaluate to true, for and to be true, then if is not saying if this condition is true, then you should indicate cash over 200. Else, if this condition is not true, then indicate others. So assuming that A2 is not cash, even though B2 is greater than 200. In that case, because one of them is not true and we evaluate to false. So if it is false that is evaluated there, it will now indicate order. But if it is true, it will indicate cash over 200. Mind you, anything that has to do with string is always in quotation mark. As you can see, cash is in quotation mark, but 200 is not in quotation mark because 200 is not a string. Cash over 200 is in quotation mark because when you combine cash over and 200, both of them, all of them becomes a string, become a text. Now, order is also a string, that is why it's inside quotation mark. I don't know if there is question or any misconception so far. I hope we're together. Now, please, in case if you have any question, do well to drop it in the chat session. I will always check the chat session for question, or you unmute yourself and speak up. All right. Now, the next is nesting if function for multiple outcomes. Now, when do we need nesting if function for multiple outcomes? That is, you're having if inside if. What we saw now is that you're having nested function, that is nested logical function, having and. You can have or as well, or even not inside if. But in this case now, you're having if function inside if function. So if you want more than two possible results, you use if function inside if function. So in the previous example, we had just two possible outcome, either for it to output cash over 200 or other. But you may decide you want it to output more than two results. So you use more than one if function. So as you can see in the syntax, you are seeing result 1 here, and you're seeing result 2, and you're seeing result 3. And you can have as much as possible. Now, even though it's going to look confusing. Now, in this case, if condition 1, normally in your if function, it will test for a particular condition. After testing for that condition, what is the next thing? The next thing is what? The value if true. So this result 1 is the value what? If true. Now, inside your if function, the next value is what? Value if false. Now, instead of you putting value if false now in that place, now you now put another if function, which takes in condition 2. Now, this condition 2 now is now giving you value if true and value if false. So result 2 is simply the value if true, and result 3 is simply the value if false. That is, the value if condition 2 is false. I go over it again. The if nested function is simply used to test more than two conditions. Like we said earlier on, that if function takes in one condition and then it will now take in value if true, after which it will now take in value if false. So this result 1 is the value if this condition 1 is true. Now, after your comma, the next thing that you should be expecting is the value if it is false. But instead of the value if it is false, you now indicate another if function, meaning that if condition 1 is false, okay, test more. You need more testing for multiple results. Okay, if it is false, okay, check this also. That is the second condition. And then if that second condition is true, then put result 2. If it is false, then finally put result 3. That is how it works. Now, we have an example here. We say if what is in A2 is snow, wear winter jackets. Now, the next thing would have been, what should I do if it is false? If it is false, it should have been I should not wear winter jacket. But instead of now indicating what you should do if it is false, because you want multiple testing, you now add another if condition and say, so if that A2 is not snow, then say if A2 is rain. Because if it is not snow, then it could be that it is raining. Though it could also be that it is sunny. So if A2 is snow, wear winter jacket. Value if false. Now you are now testing more to know if it is raining since it's not snow. So now if it is not raining, you now say okay, take umbrella. Otherwise, if it is not raining, you wear normal clothes. Why are you wearing normal clothes? Because it could be that it is now sunny. I believe we are together. We're going to do a number of exercises to see to all of this. We're going to do a number of exercises. I just hope everyone will cope. Now, comparison table, which is just a summary of what we have talked about so far. Functions we have here is and, which we have talked about, or, not, if. And we give you true if all the condition is true. Once any condition is false, it will give you false. Or we give you true if just one condition is true, even though the rest are false. But it will give you false if all of them is false. Now, the not is simply negation. So if the original value is testing false and you put not, it will give you true. So if the original value is testing true and you put not, it will give you false. So not is simply trying to change what is true to false or change what is false to true. And if is you're testing one condition at a time, even though like I said there is ifs function, you're testing multiple condition. That does not replace the if nested function. So it checks if condition is true. It check if condition is true and it return a value if it is true and return and you indicate another value is going to return if it is false. I hope we are together. Now, okay, somebody is saying something in the comments. Okay, thank you. Now, excuse me. Now, if you are using data camp, if you have access to data camp, you have this question: which condition formula is right? And please, somebody should unmute and say, or give us the answer. I wish I did not highlight the answer here. Okay, but okay, okay. Let's continue. Then, it's a which conditional formula is right for this statement? A colleague in the HR team at DataCo has sent you a table from one of their HR files where a new column has been added using conditional formula called male greater than 30. So this is the column in question, male greater than 30. So it's checking if it is male and also if it is the age of the male is greater than 30. So however, they do not know what formula was used so that they can recreate it. Possibly what we did in the last class, after creating a column with a formula, we copied it and then pasted all the value. So in that case now, nobody will know how that column was created because we have copied only the value and deleted the formula. So in this case now, we are asking what formula can give you this result? I don't know if somebody can give us an answer. When you have employee column, gender, age, and then you are now able to get this particular column that checks if it is a male, and if it's a male, you're also checking if the age is greater than 30. Please, I'd like somebody to give us an answer in this case. What possible combination of function will give you this column? If you want to answer, please mute yourself. Is there any person that want to help us? A formula that can generate this column. First of all, it will check if the gender is male, and then next, it will check if age is greater than 30. So it's simply selecting the male that are greater than 30.